Okay, so I'm delighted to be speaking to Simon Riddell. And Simon, I got to hear about your work through a newspaper article, and it was really interesting what you've been doing with photography. Do you want to say a wee bit about what you have been doing with photography? Because it's fascinating.
Okay, I guess the sort of the stuff that was written about in the article is it's kind of the most recent stuff that I've been up to, which is basically on a wet plate collodion artist, which means that I use a very old Victorian process of photography. It's
Mhm.
like the second, or maybe second type of photography that you sort of invented. It's certainly the first type of photography that's sort of used widespread, and it was invented in 1851 by Frederick Scott Archer. Um, and I was attracted to it because I read up and found out that it was the most technical and most difficult forms of photography to practice,
Mhm.
and that it was fraught with danger, which again attracted me quite a lot into it. You're using explosive chemicals and really dodgy, stuff like silver nitrate. So, you've got to be really, really careful with it. So there's a lot of chemistry involved.
Mhm.
Um, and I decided to take this up, and that was in the first week of COVID lockdown.
All right, as recent as
Um,
that. Wow. Okay.
yeah, so completely self-taught, and at that time I really, really sort of needed something to immerse myself in.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I started with the process, and didn't really do any research about how to do it and what to avoid, in terms of making mistakes and all the rest of it. I just really treated it as a journey, and just wanted to learn it completely by myself. So
Mhm.
I made tons of mistakes with it, um, and but every sort of mistake I made, obviously I learned from it. And the next plate I tried to shoot was, I had that knowledge, sort of dialed in, and
Yeah.
I'd make another mistake, and then gradually I started being able to make plates. And anyway, long story short, I used it as a method of self-discovery during COVID, doing like loads of self-portraits, and sort of really got to grips with the process and thought, right, this is like post COVID now. What do I do with this process that I've learned? And I was obviously like really looking for a challenge, and I thought, right, okay, I don't see many people shooting collodion outdoors.
Mhm.
The guys that are shooting it are using like a mobile darkroom, um, be that like a tent or a converted van, or a transit van, or they're legging it back to a nearby building to do the developing. And I thought, yeah, I can do that, but I want to go like one step further at least. And so I thought, well, I'm kind of obsessed with the Cullen Mountain, driving past it every day, in Skye, and I'm a keen climber and mountaineer as well. So I thought, right, I know that the environment in the Cullen is absolutely brutal, and you really have to watch what you're doing up there. Can be super unsafe. The weather conditions are absolutely mental, and I thought, let's maybe just try and shoot collodion up there. Um, and so I did like loads of research into it just to see if anybody had tried it before, and nobody had tried it on large format. So I thought, right, that's my challenge.
Mhm.
And so I guess like I've probably been at it for about 18 months now.
Mm.
And it's just been really horrifically sort of tough. but
Yeah.
um, but yeah, the article, to come back to that, was about having completed kind of like what I refer to as phase three of the project, which is like shooting kind of at altitude when you're up in the mountain,
Mhm.
totally miles away from any type of civilization or help
Yeah.
or assistance. So I was able to make a plate up there, um, and it was quite a meaningful plate. I can speak to you about that
Mhm.
in a little bit more detail if you want. But yeah, so that was pretty much the last plate that I shot a few months ago now.
Mhm.
Um, So yeah, feeling quite happy, but now it's all about sort of putting together all the footage that I've collated and shot over the last couple of years, to make my documentary called Peak Perseverance.
Brilliant stuff. So, I mean, most people, I think, and for those that don't know the Cuillins, yeah, as you said, it's a mountain range sort of in the middle of the Isle of Skye, and very rugged, as you say, very, very challenging. And for most people to actually just take a camera up there would be a challenge in itself to get a photograph. But no, you've got all this equipment. And where did you find the equipment to do this? I mean, because it can't just not, it's in shops, is it?
No, it's not. It's an absolute nightmare to come across. And if you do come across, stuff, it's normally really, really expensive.
Mm,
There's probably about 1,000 people in the world that shoot it, and people that shoot it, are generally shooting it in a studio. And there's stuff on forums and all the rest of it, but to buy like a legitimate, sort of like 1900s like camera, you're still looking about, anywhere between 2 and 10 grand.
wow.
And certainly, the newer cameras that are being made, like the top notch ones, are about 16 grand. And it's just like, no, I'm not, not in a
Yeah.
position to do that. So there's a company called Intrepid
Hmm.
that sort of manufacture folding field cameras. And pre-COVID and pre-shooting wet plate, I had bought a couple of cameras from those guys, and they're affordable and they're very lightweight.
Hmm.
So that was perfect for me. And then, you know, um, thereafter you're looking at a lightweight tripod and just the whole. It's kind of like a juxtaposition with Peak Perseverance, because obviously you want lightweight gear, but then you put in a fairly heavy camera on it,
Hmm.
and if it's not really sturdy, it's just an absolute nightmare, because the
Yeah.
wind obviously up in the Cuillin's crazy. So I went through like this phase of testing stuff out for probably about 8 months. um, and a lot of the stuff I built myself, and had people 3D print stuff as well, like the holding tank. So when I've shot a plate, you're up in the Cuillin,
Mm.
and you need to keep that plate wet and wash it off for about 15 minutes. Obviously, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, I had to like really think out of the box. And obviously in winter, all your water sources up there are pretty much frozen.
Yeah.
So it was just, it's been a really interesting project. But yeah, so buying stuff, buying broken stuff and fixing it,
Mm.
making my own stuff, just anything really.
Yeah. What I'll do, I'll share the article anyway, on the video here. But it was really interesting to see that you'd connected it to you were getting some therapy for your own PTSD, and you found that this was almost something that added to the therapeutic element of what you were doing. And was it the nature of the added complexities that you were setting yourself? Do you think that assisted with the therapeutic nature, or what was it about the process that you found therapeutic?
Yeah, I think you're on the ball with it. Initially, sort of when because so all of the chemicals arrived in the post, and then you're like, okay, I've got kind of an idea of what I need to do. I need to, like, mix the silver nitrate crystals with distilled water, and then I need to do a pH test, and then I need to pour collodion, which is dissolved gun cotton, and
Hmm.
with ether and ethanol, and I need to sensitize the silver bath, and so it's all kind of right, you know, scientific from that point of view. So you're you really, I mean, at least I was really immersed in getting the chemicals right. Um, and there's tons of safety stuff involved as well. So it's kind of like a slow process.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously you're excited because you want to get out and load the plate and take a shot, but you can't, you've
Mm.
got to do these things systematically. So it allowed me to just jump into the process and slow myself down, and think about what kind of shots I could create, without, obviously. So in terms of like digital, you can go out straight away and bang, 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 and then
Mm.
you're back, and then you can see what you're doing. but I wasn't looking for that. I needed like a long-term kind of really deep project to get involved with. So obviously when I got my chemicals sorted, then you're on to the next sort of exciting step about, okay, learning to pour stuff and, not blow yourself up because you've got,
Mm.
chemicals that are highly explosive and
Yeah.
stuff like that near open flame. So there's all this, it's so many things in your head, but
Hmm.
you have to be quiet so that you're not going to make a mistake that could be, bad. Um, so yeah, it really lended itself to sort of, being quiet up here and having no other real room for, thoughts and stuff like that to come in.
Yeah.
It was almost just like, when I found things really difficult historically, before I found art and stuff, I would, quite often jump on a motorbike and, that would be, you had to be 100% concentrated and
Yeah.
all the rest of it. But wet plate collodion obviously is the same thing, if not actually way more than that. So
Hmm.
it just like you've got no other capacity for anything else. And
Yeah.
often I find like if people are talking to me, especially out in the mountain when I'm doing it, I just don't even hear them because it's just, you're super in it.
Yeah. And it sounds like a process that you've got complete control over. And but within that, there's disappointments when you develop it and see the mistakes. But like you said, you've then, okay, I'll come to terms with that error and I'll use that next time. So it sounds like it's probably there's more control in that process than there would be in digital photography or something like that, where it is maybe just like, oh, rubbish, delete, and you don't actually look at the image and learn why that was poor or why it didn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're thinking like in terms of obviously we're talking about Sky and
Mm.
the fact that you know it quite well, and you'll be familiar with tourists just stopping at a lay-by, getting out, or sometimes not even getting out, and then bang, 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 18 frames in a second or whatever, and it's like you know you, with collodion, it used to take me about 8 hours to create one image, and that
Hmm.
image used to just be like not technically great at all,
Yeah.
but it gave me the opportunity to like learn like that these technical errors, actually some of them looked really cool,
Mm. Yeah.
and I could like incorporate some of those technical errors um on purpose to create a more interesting kind of plate to me.
Yeah.
So without making those mistakes, I wouldn't have like this control and this kind of mastery over the chemicals, and so I really love the fact that you are going to fail when you shoot wet plate collodion. There's no doubt
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
um and that was really kind of reassuring, because obviously when you're going to fail, but if you treat it in the right kind of positive aspect and frame of mind, then okay, failure is just progress, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was really reassuring to me. But it the flip side of that is failing when you've walked like 2 days into the in the snow, and then you're like, oh, I've only got a limited supply of chemicals and they're not working great and it's really hazy and all the other stuff that's going on and the wind, and then you're just like, oh, am I going to be able to make a plate?
Mm.
um so yeah, I mean, as I say, I'm like, you know currently in the editing process of Peak Perseverance, and
Yeah.
yesterday I was just sort of like looking at when I went up to Skirnastree, and we shot from Captain Marion's monument up there, which is super remote. And this guy, went away on a walk from Sligachan Hotel in 1946, and he wasn't found for 2 years.
Mm.
And his best mate built this cairn for him, and I just wanted to go up there and kind of be in that kind of atmosphere for a while. And obviously, like the foot um the landscape up there is just incredible.
Mm.
Um, So I wanted to shoot there, but you know, this particular day was like 20 degrees. It was May. It was absolutely, it was like a heat wave or something, super hazy, sweating from everywhere, you know, really windy. And I thought, do you know, it's okay because I'm not in control of the weather and all these other things. I'm just gonna just go with it
Hmm.
and have a nice experience, even though it's very difficult. And that's what I went with. And you know, the plate that came out of it, I mean, the first one was terrible. The second one washed away
Hmm.
on glass, but the third one came out and it's just fine. Um, you know, so it's just, I don't know. The whole time that I was up there, I was content. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah,
so that's kind of what it does for me, is it quietens everything down and I'm content in what I'm doing, you know.
fantastic. You mentioned earlier about a particular shot that you took, and you said that you could say a bit more about that shot. Do you want to say something about the shot you captured?
Yeah, remind me of which one it is again.
Um,
What was I talking about?
I'm tracking back. I think it was the whole process of how you got into using the wet plate process, and that you'd got all this equipment to the top, but you'd actually produced something that you thought was I think it was after 3 days.
Yeah, it might be the shot that I was just alluding
All
to
right, okay,
actually.
yeah,
Yeah, you know, I had the actual plate up here yesterday. It's downstairs now, but yeah. So this particular shot was of basically of Captain Marion's monument, but
mm,
obviously then looking out to the North Cullen Ridge, um, and you know, just like even navigating up to that point is difficult, and then you know, when we got there, conditions were just horrific to shoot wet plate, and just you know, so when you go into warm temperatures and you start pouring the collodion, it goes really sticky and
mm,
doesn't flow properly. So I was having horrendous problems, but and then my LED red lights weren't working in my sort of dark tent. So just like everything was going wrong, and I was feeling the sort of stress build up, but I thought, you know, if we don't get it, there's always another day. And yeah, it's going to really suck to have to walk up again. But, you know, I guess that's why I called the documentary Peak Perseverance, because I was willing to sort of set everything aside to get up and shoot that, you know, 5 by 7 inch large format plate. And I guess what that means to me is that I have stuck in and persevered and you know seen it through, and you know the plate isn't technically amazing, but it is exactly the same as kind of the other plates in its kind of era. Looking back, it looks like it was shot in 1851, 1860, whatever. So from that point of view, I can't expect anything else. And you know, I think in terms of how that resets your mind is, you know, just sort of mainly feeling sort of, you know, a lot of gratitude for having found the art form and having found what it does for me, and you know, having something tangible to kind of look at and say, yeah, I remember that, and that was horrific, that was horrific, that was horrific, but here's the plate. Um, and certainly in terms of like my other project that I did before Peak Perseverance, which was called Mental Collodion, again, looking back at some of those plates, it kind of allows me to think, wow, you were feeling really bad at that point,
mm,
and you know, you totally labeled all of the feelings and thoughts and emotions on this plate, and you've got this kind of realization that you don't feel like that anymore, or
yeah,
you know. And I think that was the whole thing about Mental Collodion, was that realization that feelings are temporary. You know, and I guess um that kind of realization that okay, I did feel really bad, now I don't feel as bad,
mm,
that made something click in my head, that maybe if I keep doing this and keep working on myself, then I'll be able to lengthen that amount of time that I feel content with.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that really makes sense, but
It makes a
you
lot of
know,
sense. Yeah, it's almost like the photograph becomes an emotional marker in time. So it's not only the aesthetic quality of the image for you, it's much more about what was invested in that image to produce it. And it's almost, it takes you back to not just framing the photograph, but what else was going on in your life for you at the time. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
yeah, yeah, I'm glad it makes sense.
Right.
um, but yeah, and that kind of feeling of gratitude now, is massive, because it's really helped. And just by looking at the plates and being able to, that's what it does. It allows me to observe without feeling
Mm,
that. Do you know? So you've gone through something, you've had that kind of catharsis, but then then you're able to look at how you felt and look at how you maybe feel from an observational point of view, without those massive kind of emotions like
yeah,
overwhelming you.
yeah.
So that's another big element for it.
Fantastic. And so you're working on the video at the moment. Have you got any other projects in mind about where you'd like to take the equipment next?
Yeah, I think what I'll probably do is, so I was absolutely adamant that nobody was going to help me on peak perseverance. Like, I didn't let anybody carry any equipment, or wet plate stuff, sleeping stuff,
Mhm.
food, nothing. And my equipment bag was about 35 kilograms, which is just madness
Yeah.
going up there. So now I think what I've been toying with is, okay, I know I can do it off my own back now. That's brilliant. That was like putting my stamp on it, sort of thing. And also set myself a really brutal challenge, because that's what I needed at that point.
Mhm.
Now, having gone through all that and achieved it, I don't feel that I need to prove stuff like that now.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be really nice to make some more plates, up in the ridge or somewhere else. And just have a bit more kind of um relaxation and sort of enjoyable kind of experience. And I'm not saying it wasn't enjoyable, but
Yeah.
you know potentially less physical.
Yeah.
And maybe share some of my stuff out. And there's been a lot of interest in, actually, crikey, you can do that up the mountain. I'd really love to learn that. So
Mm.
maybe there's something in the pipeline, like a workshop where we all go up
Yeah.
and take maybe a couple of cameras, a couple of lenses, and experiment. I quite like the idea of shooting portraits of people in the landscape up there.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably where I'll go with it.
Cool. And you don't mind if I share your website? Because obviously you've got images on there. And I have to say your black and white work is stunning. I mean, just striking. So when you were talking about doing portraits in the environment there, I was just thinking back to the images I saw on your site going, yeah, that's gonna work nicely. It's
Yeah.
very nicely. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, no, glad you like them. And yeah, they're really different. And you know um absolutely fine to share them. And hopefully it's just this week we find out whether the images that I was shortlisted for with the Scottish Portraits Awards. I think on Thursday they make the decisions on two portraits. So yeah, it's good to be kind of recognized and stuff like that. And yeah, I think the future looks really good for the next couple of years.
Mm.
Quite really quite interested in sharing the process and sharing my experience up the mountain with people.
Totally. And your contact details are on your site, are they? So people can get in touch with you to find out a bit more about the process and find out about
Absolutely.
future workshops or something.
Yeah, absolutely, they are. Yep.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Have you got any sort of final words of advice for anyone who's looking to use photography alongside, I guess, other inputs in terms of mental health, mental well-being, that you've picked up yourself that you're thinking, yeah, that's probably a good bit of advice to pass on.
Yeah, I think I think for me, the main advice is to to sort of relax into the process. And you know, it's the biggest thing that helped me was not being worried about making mistakes, not being worried about asking for help, you know, in the process. Thankfully, the wet plate collodion community is really awesome. So that was really good. But I think the biggest thing is, you know, if you're not enjoying it, then move on to something else. You know, it has to sort of, it has to be making you feel content. And you know, it can be really hard and really challenging. That's fine. But if you're
Mhm.
not enjoying it, then you know, do something else.
That's great advice. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Simon. I much appreciate your time.
Okay, Neil, thanks a lot, mate.